Welcome to Business Insight. I'm Peter Marx, and my guest is Jeffrey S. Davis. He's the president of Mage LLC. He is an adjunct lecturer at Babson College, and he's the author of a new book, The 24-Hour Turnaround. Jeffrey, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about what your background has been.
Well, you know, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and so I was put to work at about the age of 12 in factories doing factory work. Did factory work for many years, then worked for my stepfather in the food wholesale and distribution business, where I was a picker, a member of the Teamsters local in Montreal actually. Did that, had a degree in psychology and then some background in business, and then went and worked for two of the largest marketing firms in the world, working on marketing positionings and product launchings for companies like, for agencies, but with accounts like Avis, Quaker Oats, American Airlines, IBM, Ocean Spray. And also worked at a division of J&J in sales and sales management, and started my firm about 25 years ago with the purpose of really working with entrepreneurs to help them to understand how to get their business to the next level with a little bit less stress and a little bit easier to do, because I felt that, you know, entrepreneurs needed that kind of help and that assistance in being able to do that.
Has it changed at all in the years since you started it?
Well, just the way we offer our product or service has changed dramatically. And you know, I think the pace of change of technology, the way technology works, the complicated aspects of business, there's a complexity to business that wasn't there 25 years ago. And leaders need to understand how to deal with that complexity and integrate change at a much faster pace than they ever did before. And that alone has changed, I think, the whole playing surface.
And what prompted you to write The 24-Hour Turnaround? Well,
I think it was the convergence of a few events in my life. First of all, having worked for, you know, over 35 years for entrepreneurs, and I've really been a practitioner working with over 700 companies, it really sort of, and been reading all the time, and I felt that a lot of books that came out were really focused on people who are looking for tenureship from schools, or people who are trying to win some kind of Nobel Prize in economics or something. And I felt people really weren't talking to entrepreneurs in a way that was accessible to them. I also felt I had had a bout of cancer, and the economy was crashing 3 years ago, and I really wanted to get a message out that for companies that wanted to succeed in this economy, it probably wasn't as difficult as they thought it was. And I picked 6 companies to write the book about that are in 3 countries, 6 different industries. I interviewed all of them with my co-author, Mark Cohn, and they were all—
How did you pick them?
How did I pick them?
Yeah.
Really, because I thought their stories were interesting, that they had been successful in their industries, that I wanted to show some kind of, again, diversity of companies, because a lot of people will say to us over the years, well, you know, our industry is different and our business is different. And the interesting thing about these 6 entrepreneurs, 6 different size companies, as I said, 3 countries, 6 industries, and each one, if you peel away the surface, did the same things that made them successful. And so what we're saying is, if you do the right things, it really doesn't make a difference what industry you're really in. Doing the right thing is the right thing.
And you mentioned tough times.
Right.
What makes it tough times for entrepreneurs?
Well, you know, the government wasn't helping small and medium-sized business, the medium-sized market 3 years ago. And I still think today they've basically abandoned that marketplace. I think that the political system is really catering to large corporations that are funding their campaigns, and 90% of all job growth in the United States comes from the small, medium-sized entrepreneurial sector, and they're really not getting any benefit, and they're paying the bulk of the taxes. And so these companies were left, they were having trouble getting bank loans, and they really had to learn to go it alone. And so these were the companies that survived, and some of them who grew really did it despite the system. And I think that's what really shows something that's special about them.
Just as an aside, what types of things should the government be doing differently to really put their efforts toward the entrepreneurial
I don't want to get in
ventures?
trouble with anyone. I'm an equal opportunity offender. But I think that you know, some of the tax loopholes that exist for large corporations that don't exist for small corporations are not fair. If you look at the effective tax rate, small businesses are paying approximately 33% taxes, and companies like GE are paying 0%. And I really don't think that that's very fair. And so I think that those tax loopholes shouldn't be there. But that goes back to the whole funding of political campaigns. If the large corporations have the money to fund the campaigns, they're going to get the benefits back and forth. So it's sort of like one hand feeds the other. And small business isn't in that position to do that. But since job creation and the basis of our economy has always been small business, I think that the American government should really cater to the aspect of this society that's really built the country. and really give us the opportunity. And again, small business is where real self-expression happens, where real individuality happens. And I think you know that as well.
Let's go a little bit into the meat of the book, and one person I thought was interesting was Ken Ferry. Tell us a little about him and his challenges and so forth.
Well, I like to quote one of my other clients who read the book and said to me that Ken Ferry was his favorite. And I asked him, why Ken? Because Ken, when I wrote the book, wasn't necessarily, it didn't necessarily hit me as being my favorite in the book. And I said, why Ken? And he said, because most leaders are either a front of the house or the back of the house leader, which is, you know, from the restaurant trade, and that expression. And he said, what I like about Ken is that he's both a front of the house and back of the house leader, and that over his career he has learned to move from one side to the other based upon the needs of the organization. And he's been successful, very successful on both sides. And I think that's really what we liked about Ken, that he's a front of the house and back of the house guy, and also that he went into a business that was in the medical field. It wasn't making the growth objectives that they wanted to. And he also, this is a company that went public.
Now, what was his background? Before he got there, what was he doing? And
well, I consider Ken to be a professional executive. He's a for-hire sort of CEO of companies. And not everybody in the book is a for-hire CEO. Some of them, most entrepreneurs have started their own businesses. But Ken Ferry is a for-hire CEO who has an entrepreneurial perspective. He knows how to go into a company and how to build it.
And so, now, tell us a little about this business and what did it look like when he got there and what did he do? And
well, you know, again, without getting in too much detail so we can talk about some of the others, I think what I like about Ken is he was able to build a relationship with the owner of the company, get a proper agenda for him to run it properly, because a lot of times you can get hired to do a job, but then you really don't get the leash to do it properly. And Ken really negotiated the proper strategy and then was given the authority to do both the hiring and firing, or as Bill Parcells says, he was not only able to work with the groceries, but he was able to buy the groceries. And he was able to bring in the management team that he believed would do the best job for the company without any rules. And once he brought in his management team, you saw a dramatic difference in the business. And too many times entrepreneurs get too held back by trying to work with their management team. I mean, I've coached for, you know, over 35 years, and a lot of coaches don't necessarily like, you know, they're always enamored with the people they coach, and they always think people are capable of getting to the next level. But if you're a good coach, you really want to work with the stars, the people who are going to get better. The people who are not going to get better are not the people you want to work with, because they're the ones who are going to get you fired. You want to be able to work with people who want to improve the organization, want to look inward and improve themselves. And with Ken Ferry, he had a team that was more focused on doing the right thing than doing the thing that they've always done in the past.
Now you have what you call the 24-hour turnaround principles. What are some of those that you think he embodies or he employed when he was doing this?
Well, I think Ken, like all of the people in the book, have something that I think all leaders should consider, and not all business schools teach that. All these leaders had a great sense of personal and social values. And remember, if you're going to work for somebody, and I'm sure you've had employers in your life, you want to work for people you respect, who are not out to just make money. And all these people had a great sense of values, and they connected their businesses with their community and what they were going to do. And because of that, even during times of adversity, they were able to generate great loyalty from people, because they wanted to work for people who really cared about people and cared about the world around them. And I think that's an important principle. The other thing is, all these people, and I'm going to simplify everything, they all had a great strategy. They all knew where they wanted to go, and they knew how to get there, and they weren't going to compromise on that. And they held people high, and they held the bar high regardless of what they were doing. They learned how to use technology to monitor them, and they learned how to set those goals and really work with those goals. So those are just a couple of the few. There were 10 principles in the book that we work with, and actually at the end of the book, to make it easy on entrepreneurs again, we have this self-evaluation tool that they can do quickly to measure themselves and have their team measure themselves against these 10 principles. And then on the next section, they can then use those 10 principles to use it as a planning tool, so that within 24 hours they can be headed on the proper strategic course.
So Ken was one of my favorites. What's somebody who was one of your favorites?
Well, that's like asking me if I like, you know, both my children say to me, I'm your favorite. So in front of all my, the people in my book, they're all my favorite. But so let me just touch a little bit upon some of them on the book. I really like Richard Cohn. I like Richard Cohn because Richard is a humble man.
Now say what the
Richard
business
Cohn
is.
is Classico Productions. It's a company in London, England. Richard never had any ambition or a family history of entrepreneurship. He had no ambition to be that. He worked for an event planning company in London, England, and all he wanted to do was a great job. And he felt his employer was compromising the work and the projects they were working on. So he left and started a project on his own, and today he's one of the fastest growing event planning companies in England. And it's all about quality for him. It's all about quality and people. And so I think what I like about it is it was never about the money for Richard. It was always about just doing great work. I have another fundamental interest in Joel Rabinowitz, Toronto, Canada.
So just back to...
Yeah, sorry.
It doesn't matter where you are in the world, the principles still apply.
Principles still apply for all of them.
Okay.
What I like about Joel is that Joel is basically the same person at 55 years old that he was at 5 years old. And that was in 1963. He heard Ed Sullivan talk. He heard Ed Sullivan say, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles," and fell in love with the Beatles. And that took his life really on a magical mystery tour. And Joel followed that love of music and the Beatles into the licensing business and the rock and roll industry. Eventually became friends with Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, and used that to become a serial entrepreneur in the licensing business. And I think, with people, you need to go with your passion. And Joel has found a way to use his passion and his love of music and being starstruck to build a whole career and build wealth for himself. I'm a big fan.
We all wish that we could do that.
Well, I think that's the key for all executives, to really find that passion. And that's another principle that they all had. They're all following their passion.
Is this something that you would say you're born with, through experience, you're taught? How does one become that?
Well, I think it's a little bit nature-nurture. I do think that entrepreneurs are born. They have a certain attitude. There's a willingness to take risks, to multitask, to do things. They don't have the same perspective on the world that employees have. But entrepreneurship can be taught. I believe that. And so
since you're adjunct at Babson,
well, let's just look at it as it's like a fertilizer. That if you have a flower, you want to help it as much as you can. And I believe that with entrepreneurship, if you put the right fertilization on it, it can grow strong and it can grow multiple flowers. So that's the way I look at it. So it can be taught, but not to someone who really doesn't have those basic instincts.
Do you think there's any lessons in your book for intrapreneurs? Entrepreneurs who are within a large organization?
Oh, absolutely. Entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, and it can happen in many fields, and it doesn't always have to happen in an organization. It can happen in music, it can happen in the arts, in lots of fields. If people are people who like to innovate and do new things and are willing to go into new areas, are intellectually inquisitive people, that's a form of entrepreneurship. So I think that can be helped and that can be nurtured. And you see that a lot in children. Children who are willing to take risk, who get themselves in trouble, they're more people who think a little bit more outside of the box. And you have to understand, even with children, how to develop those skills.
What do you think about the future prospects for our nation in continuing to develop, nurture, or whatever, these kind of entrepreneurs?
Well, I want to be an optimist when it comes to these things. And my mother used to always say to me when I had trouble at school as a child, "Don't worry, the cream will always rise to the top." And I believe that the inherent character of America is entrepreneurship. It's what's made this country great. Benjamin Franklin, who's on the cover of my book, was a serial entrepreneur himself. And I believe the basic character of this country is the pursuit of individual expression. And so I don't think that the system will win out over the individual. I think the individual will win out over the system despite its flaws and its limitations. And I hope that's a clear enough answer.
Well, we're out of time. I think anybody that wants to learn more about this should certainly get a copy of the 24-hour turnaround. You can get it from Amazon, or Jeffrey, you were saying the name of the publisher is?
Happy About. And they
Happy About. So with that, Jeffrey Davis, thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.